Are you looking for self-assessment tools that are easy to use and actually work? In this video, I'm going to answer 3 of the biggest questions teachers have. What are these tools? How can you implement them in your language classroom? And most importantly, how do they really improve your students' learning outcomes? I'll not only show you practical tools you can start using today, but I'll also break down step by step how to integrate them seamlessly into your teaching, no matter your classroom setup. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll see just how powerful these strategies can be in boosting your students' progress. Let's dive in. Let's dive into self-assessment tools. So, your students are actively taking charge of their own learning, reflecting on their progress, and setting goals like mini language learning bosses. Sounds amazing, right? But here's the thing. Getting students to that point doesn't happen by accident. It takes the right tools, and that's exactly what I'm going to show you. These simple, effective self-assessment tools can completely transform your classroom. But stick with me, because by the end, you'll see how powerful these tools really are. First up, rubrics. Now I know what you're thinking. Rubrics can be so dull, right? But not when you use them like this. Rather than just handing students a list of expectations, give them a self-assessment rubric that encourages them to rate their own performance. Let them decide if they've hit those targets. You'll be amazed at how much more invested they become when they're in control of grading themselves. It shifts the power from the teacher to the student, and suddenly they're thinking critically about their own work. Spoiler alert, they get more honest about where they can improve too. Another game changer, self-reflection journals. Now hear me out. This isn't your standard write about your day journal. What if at the end of a lesson or a unit, students took just a few minutes to jot down what they've learned, where they struggled, and what they want to work on next? They don't just regurgitate information, they reflect on how they learned it, and by doing this regularly, they start to see patterns in their own progress. Best part, you'll see students who are not only more engaged, but motivated to take those next steps. And last, but definitely not least, let's talk about goal-setting checklists. Sounds simple, right? But this is where the magic happens. When students set their own goals, whether it's nailing a tricky grammar point or mastering conversational phrases, they take ownership of the process. The key here is to help them break those goals into smaller, manageable steps. And when they literally check things off a list, they start to feel a sense of accomplishment, and that momentum is everything in language learning. So if you're looking to boost engagement, these tools can do it. Because when students take ownership of their learning, they're not just going through the motions anymore. They're invested, and that's when the real progress happens. So you've got these amazing self-assessment tools, but how do you actually get them into your classroom without it feeling like just another thing to add to your pile? Let's break it down step by step. And I'm not talking about some complicated overhaul here. This is about making small changes that have a huge impact. Trust me, by the time we're done, you'll see how easy it is to get your students on board with these tools and watch them take ownership of their learning. The first thing you want to do, ease into it. Don't just throw a bunch of self-assessment tools at your students and expect them to run with it right away. Start small. For example, introduce a simple rubric during a project. Let them score themselves on just 1 or 2 areas to start. Maybe something like participation or effort. The goal here is to get them comfortable with the idea of reflecting on their work without overwhelming them. Once they get the hang of it, then you can start expanding it to more detailed self-assessments. And speaking of comfort, the next big thing is to explain the process in a way that makes sense to them. Let's be real. If students don't understand why they're doing this, they're not going to take it seriously. So take some time to show them how self-assessment helps them improve. You could even do a fun, quick demo where you assess yourself on something simple, like your ability to use technology. Cue relatable moment here by showing your vulnerability. You give them permission to reflect on themselves without fear of judgment. Now, here's where the magic really happens. Gradual integration. Once your students are familiar with the tools, start building them into your regular classroom routine. If you're teaching in person, this might look like weekly reflection journals or rubrics after every project. In an online setting, you can set up Google Forms for quick self-assessments or create a shared space for students to post their reflections. The key is consistency. Make it a part of the learning process, not just an occasional activity. And guess what? Once your students understand how these tools work and start using them consistently, you'll notice something amazing. They'll begin taking more responsibility for their own progress, and they'll start setting personal goals, reflecting on what they need to work on, and even looking forward to checking off their achievements. At that point, it's not just your classroom anymore, it's theirs too. All right, amazing teachers, let's be real. Classroom management can feel like juggling flaming swords some days, right? Well, I've got something that'll make it way easier. If you've ever wished your students would listen, stay engaged, and actually enjoy being in class without you losing your mind, you need to check out my Dynamic Discipline course. It's a 10-part series packed with proven strategies for building strong relationships with your students and mastering classroom management, so you can focus on teaching, not putting out fires all day. You'll get live webinars, on-demand access, exclusive resources, and of course, an awesome community of teachers who get it. Want to finally feel in control of your classroom? Head over to mm.us/discipline and let's turn those chaotic days into smooth, fun teaching days. Now let's talk about the real magic of self-assessment and how it supercharges language learning outcomes. If you're thinking self-assessment sounds good, but does it really make a difference? Stick around because the results speak for themselves. When students start using self-assessment tools, it's like flipping a switch that turns their passive learning into active engagement. But here's where it really gets exciting. The benefits don't just stop at improved grades. They go much deeper. First off, self-assessment boosts student engagement in ways you wouldn't believe. When students are responsible for evaluating their own work, they're not just passively receiving feedback. They're actively involved in their own learning journey. For example, imagine a student using a rubric to evaluate their own speaking skills. They're not just waiting for you to tell them how they did. They're analyzing their performance and setting personal goals based on that. This kind of involvement makes them more invested and motivated. And let me tell you, that motivation translates directly into better language skills. And then there's the incredible boost to student autonomy. When learners start using self-assessment tools, they take ownership of their progress. This isn't just about ticking boxes. It's about becoming an independent learner who knows how to self-correct and set realistic goals. I've seen students go from struggling with basic phrases to confidently holding conversations, simply because they learn to reflect on their mistakes and target their areas of improvement. It's like giving them a roadmap to their own success. And guess what? They'll follow it. And let's not forget about reflection on progress. This is where the true power of self-assessment shines. When students regularly check in with their own learning goals and reflect on their progress, they get a clear picture of how far they've come and where they need to go next. This continuous reflection helps them understand their strengths and areas for improvement. I've had students tell me that keeping a self-reflection journal was a game changer for them. They could see their own growth over time, which motivated them to push further and achieve even more. So if you're looking to see real, measurable improvements in your students' language skills, self-assessment isn't just a tool, it's a game changer. And by fostering engagement, autonomy, and reflection, you're not just teaching a language, you're helping students become lifelong learners who take charge of their own success. And that's the kind of progress that makes all the effort worth it. And that's a wrap on easy self-assessment tools. Want to know the top 5 strategies for providing effective feedback? Check out my next video where I break it all down. Now, before you go, I'd love to hear, how do you encourage your students to take ownership of their learning? Let me know in the comments below. As always, happy comprehensible input.